The morning Carina Saunders disappeared, she moved through the world with the same restless urgency she'd carried for years. 19 years old, barely 5 feet tall, blonde, sharp-featured, and always in motion, she drifted between friends' apartments, parking lots, and fast food lobbies around the Oklahoma City area. People remembered her as talkative, emotional, sometimes scattered, and always trying to find her footing. She struggled with addiction, bounced between unstable living arrangements, and made choices that placed her close to people who dealt drugs or lived in the shadow of that world. Even so, the people who loved her were used to her checking in, even if the calls weren't always at steady hours. In early October 2011, she was seen getting into a silver SUV behind a Walmart in Bethany, west of Oklahoma City. Witnesses described it as quick, almost routine, as if she recognized whoever waved her over. She stepped inside, the door shut, and that was the last confirmed moment anyone saw her alive. Her family tried reaching her and got silence. In the first day, they didn't panic. In the second and third, they worried. By the fourth day, they began calling every number they could find. On October 13th, road workers behind a grocery store in Bethany noticed something strange near a small, overgrown field. A duffel bag sat upright near a tree line, zipped closed but bulging oddly. When an employee approached and tugged the zipper, he froze. Inside the bag were human remains, cut apart, wrapped in plastic, and packed tightly. The first officers on scene called for detectives as soon as they saw the extent of the dismemberment. They found body parts severed at joints with a combination of slicing and sawing. The cutting surfaces showed uneven edges, suggesting more than one type of blade. The head, torso, and limbs were separated, with tendons cut and bone scored. The torso showed patterned marks consistent with restraint. Bruising on the soft tissue suggested Carina had been alive during some portion of the trauma that preceded her death, though the exact sequence was impossible to determine with certainty. Dental records confirmed the remains were Carina's. Detectives notified her mother, who collapsed when she heard the words. What followed was a flood of interviews with friends and acquaintances, each offering pieces of a disordered picture. Carina had spent time around people involved in low-level drug trade and human trafficking. She often moved between motels and apartments where dealers operated. Investigators learned she had recently been threatened by men connected to a local drug network. Several witnesses described a violent atmosphere around the group, assaults used as warnings, beatings filmed on cell phones, and exploitation of vulnerable women as a method of control. One woman approached police with a story that shook detectives. She claimed she had been kidnapped by members of the same circle, held in an apartment, and forced to watch as Carina was tortured. She said Carina had been restrained, beaten, and cut in front of her as a message to others who owed money or defied orders. She described knives, a small hatchet, and a saw. She claimed parts of the attack were filmed. Her account included details consistent with the injuries on the remains, but inconsistencies in her timeline and location raised doubts. Detectives documented everything but struggled to anchor her statements to corroborating evidence. Another witness told police that Carina had been targeted because she knew too much about drug routes and internal disputes. He claimed the killing was orchestrated by a man named Jimmy Massey, a figure tied loosely to meth distribution. Massey was arrested and interrogated. He denied all involvement, but admitted knowing individuals who used fear and violence to maintain control. According to prosecutors, he implicated another man, Francisco Gomez, but later recanted, saying he only repeated rumors. Investigators searched apartments, seized hard drives, checked dumpsters, and interviewed dozens of people across multiple counties. No video of the killing was ever recovered. Detectives pieced together the condition of the remains. Carina's hands and feet showed ligature impressions, narrow and deep. The pattern suggested she had been bound with cord or wire. The marks on her ankles were tight enough to cut into skin. The cuts used to dismember her were made post-mortem, according to the medical examiner, but the blunt force injuries to her head and torso occurred while she was still alive. There were defensive wounds, deep slices along her arms and hands where she had tried to shield herself. The dismemberment was not clean. Bones had multiple false starts where blades slipped. Ribs were separated with forceful prying, leaving fractures with irregular edges. It was the work of people who were violent but not skilled. The medical examiner ruled the death a homicide by multiple sharp force injuries with dismemberment, with blunt force trauma contributing. Toxicology couldn't determine what substances were in her system at the moment of death due to decomposition and the condition of the tissues. Time of death was estimated between October 8th and 10th. When the case reached prosecution, the testimonies unraveled. The kidnapping witness contradicted herself, then changed her account again under pressure. Massey and Gomez were charged, then had charges dismissed due to lack of evidence. Other potential suspects vanished from the area. With no physical scene recovered, no weapon found, no confirmed footage, and no consistent witness testimony, the case stalled. Detectives maintained that Carina's murder was connected to drug-related violence and intimidation, but proving which individuals were responsible became impossible with the evidence available. The investigation remains open, and police continue to review leads. But no one has ever been convicted for her killing. Carina's family keeps her photo in their homes. They hold gatherings every year, light candles, and talk about the daughter, sister, and friend they lost. They push for renewed attention to the case, hoping that someone who was there, or someone who heard something, will finally come forward with details that can hold up in court. What remains is a file of interviews, autopsy records, and a timeline that shows where she was, who she trusted, and when the silence began. Her remains were buried after the autopsy, but the questions surrounding her final hours were never laid to rest. The brutality was real, the injuries were documented, and the fear she must have felt in those last moments is something her mother has spoken about publicly, saying she imagines her daughter calling out for help in a room where no one was willing to give it. Detectives believe there are still people alive who know exactly what happened. People who were in the apartment that night or helped dispose of the body. The case has room for a confession, a slip, a long-buried memory surfacing in someone's conscience. Until then, it sits unresolved, heavy, and waiting. Thank you for listening to Homicide Files. Subscribe for more true crime stories.